No, you shouldn't show up on the days I'm Time Master. I'll tell you from now on.
It is 5 o'clock.
That Hispanic party.
According to my clock up here, it is 5 o'clock. So I will call the meeting to order, but then I'll delay for just a couple of minutes while people get seated. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Councilmember Garcia,
Here.
Councilmember Kennedy,
Here.
Councilmember Valles,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem McEachron,
Here.
Mayor Cox.
Here. We have at this time, I'll give just a little bit of an explanation that we have a 5 o'clock meeting. Normally then we go into executive session and then we have a regular meeting at 6 o'clock. However, we do have an item on the agenda for the public comment, and for those individuals who are unaware, they can comment now, or they can return after the regular meeting starts at 6 and speak on the item as it comes on the agenda, or they can stay until the end of the agenda, and we have another comment period at the end of the agenda. I have cards, and I'm assuming that individuals want to speak, but if you'll note, and I will, for the record, this is C1, 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 C1. It doesn't say C1, C1, C1. All of those items start after 6 o'clock, so you have your option. Would you like to speak now, or would you rather come back after we start the meeting at 6 and speak when that item comes on the agenda? A spokesman will do. Or you can all come up and speak if you want to. You have the right to do so. The first card I have is Vivian Hauser. Is that you, madam? What, please? Sure.
Okay, oh, there we go.
Oh.
We'd like to be able to speak on C1, but before you do the voting, and we might not know exactly how this works, it seems like if we wait for the 6 o'clock meeting, then we would be speaking at the very end when everything's all through. Is that correct?
Now, what we have is we have this on the consent item, and where we have individuals who have expressed an interest on the item, then the council can pull it off the consent item, go ahead and approve the consent calendar, and then approve the item that people have requested to speak on. I just hate to have you wait an hour and a half or so to speak on the item if you're prepared to do so now, but it's up to you.
Mr. Mayor, I will, to allow them the opportunity, I would like to pull item C1 from the consent calendar.
Fortunately, we can't do that yet because it's on the 6 o'clock
It's on the
meeting
6 o'clock.
and
That
it's a
was
separate
confusion.
agenda.
Well, let me just say that I will pull it
When
at
we get
the
to
6
the-
o'clock
right.
meeting. The point is that so that they can speak on it.
Exactly. And we want
Okay.
you to speak on it.
That'd be
The
great.
choice is yours. You can speak
We would like that
now,
very much.
and we will put that in the record, or you can come back and speak again, or you can wait until the 6 o'clock meeting. It's your choice.
Want to come right to the 6 o'clock meeting, and hopefully there might be a couple of school representatives as well. So it would work out fine for us to come back at 6 then, if that would be,
Okay.
if we could do
Now,
that.
that is for you. Now, I have David Hauser. I'm going to read these because, for the record, Jerry Vincent, Amanda Schrader, Elizabeth Byers, Ashley Schrader, Jeff Byers, Roxanne Barnett, and Alan Craver do you individuals also agree to come back after the 6 o'clock meeting, or do you want to speak now? Come back. Is everyone in agreement? Okay. All the names that I called. Are there any more? Oh, well, I'm sorry. I have another card I didn't see. Tamara Craver. You agree to come back? Okay. And then I believe it is we can't take the action, but I think it's pretty clear. Council want to hear from you. We'll pull the item from the agenda at that time. You can all speak on that item when we begin our regular meeting at 6, and that item will then come up, and you'll have the opportunity to address it at that time. Anyone else?
Here, it will come up fairly early. It's a consent calendar. I mean, I
Comes
don't
up.
think you'll have a 10-minute wait once the meeting
It'll
starts.
be very quick.
There are public hearing items ahead of it, so
Yes.
but you can always pull the item and rearrange the agenda on a vote of the
So
council.
we do have public hearing items at 6. You apparently have the agenda, or you can see the agenda. Public hearings are scheduled. We will have those first because we are required to by law. Are there any other items to address the council at this time? Not. Mr. City Attorney.
Thank you, Mayor Cox. We have 8 closed session items this evening. The first two, one is for the Airport Authority. The first two are existing litigation pursuant to Government Code 54956.9D1. The names of the parties and the case numbers are set forth on the agenda. Items C, D, E, F, and G are also all existing litigation pursuant to Government Code 54956.9D1. And again, the parties to the litigation, the title of the litigation, and the case numbers are all set forth on the agenda. Item H is real property negotiations pursuant to Government Code 54956.8. The parcel numbers, these pertain to properties located adjacent to Southern California Logistics Airport, and the assessors' parcels are set forth on the agenda. To the extent there is reportable action, we will report that at the conclusion of the closed session or at the commencement of the 6 o'clock meeting.
Before we go into closed session, at a meeting sometime in the past, the council, I think we discussed in closed session the item of the old bridge or the railroad bridge, and I believe it was the city council's policy to direct the city manager and the city attorney to work out as best as they could the property owner's request for access. I'm just told that it didn't work out, that the city is going to refurbish the bridge. Can we add that into executive session today?
Unfortunately, we cannot because it is an item that did not come up subsequent to the posting of the agenda. It's an item that's been on numerous agendas, so unfortunately it's an ongoing matter. We can put it on the next agenda, though.
In the next agenda, please.
Absolutely.
Okay. At this time, we will adjourn to executive session. Our regular meeting then will start at 6, and we will all be back at that time. Executive session, so bear with us. We can get everyone in here. Thank you. I'm going to call the 6 o'clock meeting of the Victorville City Council to order. Madam Clerk, again, roll call.
Councilmember Garcia,
Here.
Councilmember Kennedy,
Here?
Councilmember Valles,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem McEachron,
Here.
Mayor Cox.
Here. We just came out of executive session. Mr. City Attorney, your presentation on that item.
Thank you, Mayor Cox. We had 8 closed session items this evening. The first 2 were for the Airport Authority. They were existing litigation pursuant to Government Code 54956.9D1. The case numbers, the parties to the litigation are all set forth on the agendas. Items C, D, E, F, and G were also existing litigation pursuant to Government Code 54956.9 D1. Again, the case names and the parties to the litigation are all set forth on the agenda. The last item was a conference with real property negotiators pursuant to Government Code 54956.8. At the property location was portions of Southern California Logistics Airport, and the assessor parcels are set forth on the agenda. The negotiating parties were Doug Robertson and the United States of America General Services Administration. At this point, there is no reportable action with respect to any of the closed session items.
Thank you. Any questions of the attorney? At this time, we have the invocation and pledge, but I don't have a note on who's going to give the invocation. Okay, go ahead. So you're here?
I'm here.
Pastor Sylvan Young, Salvation Army Victorville?
Actually, it's Nathalie Young.
Okay. And then we'll rise for the invocation, for this invocation, and then the Pledge of Allegiance followed, if you'll remain standing, by Lieutenant John Billings.
Shall we pray? Our precious and gracious Heavenly Father, we just ask you to be with us this evening as we discuss the items that are on the agenda, that the conversation will go well, and we ask these things in your holy name. Amen.
And at this time, City Clerk, do you have amendments, additions, revisions to the agenda?
Yes, we do have some revisions, Mayor Cox. Item number B3, applicant is requesting a continuance of the public hearing for insurance requirement reasons. Agenda item number B5, we have a letter from Kevin Mahaney of St. Joseph St. Mary's in support of ordinance number 2324. Item number C1, we have emails from Tamara Carver and Darren Jones, and calls from Elizabeth Baker, Julie Proctor, Ewell Steverson, Pam Steverson, Diane Ketchum, and Ann Allowing in opposition to ordinance number 2321. All items are on the dais and available for the public's review. And that's all that I have.
Thank you. Any questions from the council members? If not, we are at item A1 on the agenda, which is an appeal hearing. The City Council of the City of Victorville appeal hearing called for the purpose of hearing arguments for and against the appeal of Victorville Planning Commission's finding for consideration of revocation proceedings for PLN 14-0001 as set forth in Resolution 1428.
Mayor Cox, this is one of the unusual situations where I have to recuse myself because we represented the Planning Commission in connection with these proceedings. Mr. Donovan Collier is here. He is acting as independent counsel and will be advising you on this matter. I believe that he's probably going to recommend a continuance, but I need to leave the dais until this matter is heard.
Did you say Donovan Carter?
Collier.
Collier. And I understand because of this hearing and the appeal hearing that occurred before the Planning Commission that you sat here. All right. And then we'll determine as this proceeds whether we have the complete hearing or continue it or whatever your determination is based upon what? Your determination or the applicant? Sure, absolutely.
Excuse me. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Yes, I am Donovan Collier, and I'm here in my capacity as special counsel to the city. on the sole purpose of advising with regard to this appeal hearing. As Mr. DeBortnowski pointed out, it is an interesting situation which he needs to recuse himself. Now, I have been in contact with the applicant's attorney as late as this morning. He had requested a continuance of this hearing due primarily to health problems that he's having that precluded him from being able to attend tonight. However, above and even beyond that, in preparing for the hearing today and in discussions with staff, we discovered that there were several key witnesses who could not be here this evening, witnesses who had declaratory testimony that was before the Planning Commission, was relied upon by the Planning Commission in making their determination, but they were unable to be here this evening. Now, just in an abundance of caution, to head off any due process claims that may come at a later time from the applicant, we do request and recommend a brief continuance until the first meeting in October to allow the applicant's or the appellant's attorney an opportunity to be here, plus to get all of our witnesses in attendance that need to be here.
So it would appear then, based upon the complications that have occurred and the lack of the witnesses which are necessary as a part of the proceedings, that it would be better part of judgment for this council to continue this until the meeting in October?
That is correct, Mayor.
Any council member opposed to that? None opposed to that. Can we have a motion then from the council, because this is an appeal hearing? We need to continue the complete record and all of the minutes from this meeting to that hearing date. What would that new hearing date would be again?
First meeting on October
First
7th,
meeting.
I believe.
It's October 7th.
I'm sorry?
October 7th?
October 7th. Do we have a motion from the council?
Uh,
We have a
Motion by Councilmember Valles, a second by Councilmember Kennedy.
All in favor, say aye. Let's take a voice vote on this because it's a hearing.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. It is unanimous by the council, and this will be continued with the complete record. October the 7th, we will have that hearing at this time, and thank you.
Thank you very
Sorry
much.
you had to come all the way up for
That's
that
quite
short
all right.
presentation, but
Thank you.
thank you.
Need to record that. Here we go.
Item number 2,
Okay.
this is a request for a continuance also of this hearing on Ordinance 2322, Development Code 14-0002, rental inspections. The request from the Director of Development is that the City Council continue this item to October the 21st, 2014, so that the City Council will have the opportunity to review all the information, including some additional review that will be completed.
Mayor, which item?
We need to do
B?
Mr. Mayor, you skipped over B1. There was an A1, which was the appeal hearing, and then there was a B1. I think that may have made you stumble there.
Okay. What happens when you get a thick agenda?
That's not the first time I've
Item
heard that
one.
today, actually.
Is this the appeal hearing?
This is the speed zone public hearing, item number B1.
Let's see, my agenda isn't set up that way. Okay. All right, well, I'm just going from my agenda 1, 2, 3, and it's not there, so we'll go back to the agenda in the printed form. Item B1, City Council of the City of Victorville public hearing call to hear arguments for and against establishing speed zones on certain streets in the City of Victorville and amending Section 12.20.020 of the Victorville Municipal Code as set forth in Ordinance Number 2323. No questions of staff. I'll open the public hearing on B1 at this time. Public hearing is open if anyone wants to speak on B1. I do not have any cards or any requests to speak on the item. No one to speak. I close the public hearing. Action of the council,
I would like to read the ordinance.
please.
An ordinance of the City of Victorville establishing speed zones upon certain streets in said city and amending Section 12.20.020 of the Victorville Municipal Code entitled Decrease of State Law, Maximum Speed on Various Streets.
Move for approval and waive further reading. It on the floor or agenda and then on the floor.
Don't have a screen.
Would someone like to make a voice a second? Okay, motion by Mayor Pro Tem McEachran, second by Councilmember Baez. Motion carries unanimously.
Item B2, public hearing. Mr. City Attorney, the request is continued, but do we open the public hearing and continue it?
That is correct. I'd request that you open the public hearing, take any comments, and then continue the item.
On B2, are there any questions from the council to the staff for clarification or otherwise? There is no questions at this point in time. I will open the public hearing on B2, which I tried to do earlier, but sorry about that. This is from the Development Department, Rental Inspection Program. Staff is requesting that this be continued. There are no comments. I am going to close the public. No, I'm going to continue the public hearing because this will be continued until October 21st, 2014. Make sure that we have the continuance. We don't have to re-advertise again. We need a motion and a second and a voice vote on this matter.
Motion by Councilmember Baez, second by Councilmember Kennedy.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. No opposed. So this is unanimous that this will be continued. Item B3, another public hearing. A public hearing on proposed resolution number 14-065, granting a certificate of public convenience and necessity to R&B Systems, Inc. for a non-emergency medical transportation business. Are there any questions of staff regarding the write-up?
This is to be, this was requested to be continued. It's October 7th.
Okay.
The applicant made that request?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it's been scheduled and advertised, however, I will open the public hearing on that item. Because it's going to be continued, we will hear it again. It'll be a continued hearing, and therefore I will not close the public hearing. Again, since the request...
Motion by Councilmember Baez, second by Councilmember Garcia.
Can we vote on the machine this time, or do you want a voice vote on the continuance? My understanding is a voice vote. But
I have it ready to vote.
yeah, ready? All right.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
At this point, we do have the system caught up, so you can start using your
Okay,
mouse
thank you.
if you choose.
Okay. B4, a public hearing, General Plan Amendment DEV 13-0003, Resolution 14-062. Any questions of staff in regard to this public hearing item B4? If there is none, I will open the public hearing at this time. I have no cards or indication that anyone wants to speak. Seeing no one approaching the podium, I will close the public hearing. For a motion?
Motion by Councilmember Kennedy, second by Mayor Pro Tem McEachran.
Question before we vote. Do you have to read the resolution on this item?
No.
Okay.
You may start voting. Motion carries unanimously.
Item B5, another public hearing item. City Council, City of Vicksville, public hearing called to hear arguments for or against amending Title 16 of the Municipal Code, DEV-0003, to modify alcoholic beverage sales regulations with an environmental exemption as set forth in ordinance number 2324, entitled, and that is the ordinance which the clerk will read the ordinance after we complete the public hearing. Any questions of staff at this time? If not, I'm going to open the public hearing. We do have, as I recall, Madam Clerk, a letter that's been submitted
Yes.
Favor? And that will become a part of the record at this time. Was there any opposition?
No, there wasn't.
No
And the
opposition.
letter was from Kevin Mahaney of St. Joseph and St. Mary in support.
Thank you. I'll close the public hearing. Council members.
Need also to read the ordinance title.
Ah, you're
Oh,
right.
this was a
Okay.
Was a resolution.
Madam Clerk, you're going to read the ordinance?
I believe it's both a resolution and an ordinance.
I don't see a resolution shown here, but there may be a resolution attached.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, ordinance number 2324 entitled, "An Ordinance of the City Council, City of Victorville, approving the adoption of Amendment Development 14-00003, a Title 16 Municipal Code Amendment modifying alcoholic beverage sales regulations with environmental exemption." Motion by Councilmember Valles, second by Mayor Pro Tem McEachran. You may start voting. Motion carries unanimously.
That concludes the public hearing section of the agenda. We now have the consent calendar. We have items, I believe.
Mr. Mayor, if I could pull agenda item C1 for discussion.
We have a motion by Councilmember McEachran, Mayor Pro Tem McEachran. Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
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 Mr. Mayor, I have to abstain on item C2. I wasn't present at that meeting.
Right? You can take an action on the remainder of the consent items, pulling that item for discussion, or you can wait. Since there's nothing controversy that I know of, are there any questions of staff regarding our consent agenda? If not, can we have a motion to approve all the items on the consent with the exception of C1, which will be pulled for public discussion, and noting Mr. Kennedy's comments on C2?
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem McEachran, second by Councilmember Valles. You may start voting. Motion carries unanimously.
This item is on item number C1. The City Council had conducted a public hearing. The public hearing had been closed. This is why this is on the consent item. However, this council has always been interested in hearing from the general public and those that are directly and even indirectly affected by the ordinances. And so we've had quite a number of individuals who have requested that they be able to address the council on this matter. We want to hear from you. I have a lengthy bunch of cards, and while we want to hear from all of you, and I don't want to take away from anything you want to add, I would request, however, that we not have 14 people repeat what the person in front of them said. If you have something new to add, please do so. If you are opposed, you may say so. If you agree, you can say so, and hopefully everybody can be heard, and we won't take all the rest of the evening to hear this. So at this time, with council's approval, the first card that I have on this list, Tamara Craver. I'm sorry. I think it's Craver.
Hello, Mr. Mayor, City Council members. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak again. I just wanted to speak to the fact that I am a citizen of Victorville and I am pro-police, and I'm very thankful for our police department and all that they do. However, I believe that the serious juvenile lawbreaker will not be deterred by this anti-loitering law. However, I think too many innocent minors will suffer the inconveniences of unwarranted stops, detentions, and even harassment, not to mention added cost for taxpayers for the enforcement of the law. In a study published in the Western Criminology Review in 1999, entitled An Analysis of Curfew Enforcement and Juvenile Crime in California, the results clearly state for this 18-year study that curfew enforcement generally has no discernible effect on youth crime. And in the few instances where a significant effect was identified, it was that greater curfew enforcement was associated with higher rates of juvenile crime. Also, in a report by the ACLU of Southern California in February of 2012, the Los Angeles daytime curfew was found to have the unintended consequence of keeping students out of school in order to address the citations they received. It was also found to be ineffective because of its application to all young people, and the majority of young people are indeed law-abiding. Additionally, this study found that the LA daytime curfew was an economic burden on low-income families in the community in order to pay the fines for the children who had been cited. And it also was counterproductive because the punishments undermined student engagement. And finally, it was found to be inequitable. It had a disparate effect on students of color. So I urge you to please reconsider and to pursue other options so as not to divert our city's resources away from real community safety. Thank you.
Thank you. The next card I have is from Vivian Hauser. And then following Ms. Hauser, David Hauser. Just be prepared when she finishes. Go ahead, please.
Honorable Jim Cox, Mayor and council members, thank you so much for letting us speak. In November 1996-97, the City of Victorville considered a truancy prevention ordinance similar to the daytime loitering of minors ordinance today. After 2 study sessions with the public and a standing room only audience for the final vote, the City Council voted 4-1 against it. I'll never forget the impact invited guests from Monrovia had as they shared with us how their similar ordinance was working for them. You see, the city of Monrovia was boasting that theirs had reduced juvenile crime and truancy. However, the families who came enumerated stories of the negative impact on innocent children, youthful-looking adults, young girls stopped by police in plain clothes, driving in unmarked cars. One family whose homeschooled children walked to the local high school and back for certain courses were stopped multiple times, even though they had prearranged with the police to prevent it by wearing special shirts and finally waving fluorescent numbered cards. But the stops didn't cease. Police began to offer free Happy Meals if the children were offended. Their mother waved one of those fluorescent cards at our meeting saying, "Where in the history of the world have people needed something like this to be in public? My children have been stopped a total of 23 times, and where's my son's Happy Meals?" Well, we don't think the Victorville police would purposely intimidate any innocent children, but we do believe that a law like this doesn't protect against it. 2 years ago, after that vote, Monrovia was sued by some of their own residents over the juvenile curfew ordinance, and in a court-ordered deposition, their city's statistics were found to have actually increased in juvenile crime and truancy instead of having decreased. I know that the City Council feels something must be done, and we are sympathetic with the police. We appreciate their work. We want them to do it well. But to try out this ordinance that has never proven to reduce juvenile crime anywhere in California is a little like, to me, reruns of a pro football game and hoping that the outcome will be different. You could put a sunset clause for a year and check the effects on innocent children, but it's not so easy. When we asked the principal of the Monrovia Christian School to find out how their children were impacted by the ordinance, the adults were shocked, having been unaware of their children's stories. The Federal Freedom and Restoration Act advises that laws be made, making sure it's best or least intrusive way to carry out the city's compelling interest. And I think this kind of ordinance demonstrates why. Why not work through the existing laws in the education code? There might be significant benefit to both the school and the police if they increase their communication and efforts to work together. I talked with the Victorville superintendent, and the SARB person in charge this year, and they said they have automated machines that tell when truants are missing on the day and then from period to period. And I also talked with and that they have a SARB program that's never ceased. And I talked with the DA this morning. He said, yes, Victorville has a very active SARB program. So there's some kind of disconnect, just need greater communication. The mayor's words of integrity from the last city council meeting, albeit it was another issue, gave me hope that this council can effectively tackle this challenging issue some other way. He said, we want everyone to be heard on this. We want the community to buy into this. Obviously, something needs to be done. It appears to be a good first step, but we want to make absolutely sure. And I hope that you do on this issue, too. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Before we have the next speaker, normally when we have a public hearing item, we allow individuals to present data or speak as long as they really need to present. When you address the city council, however, on an item that's not a public agenda and that's not, we generally limit it to 3 minutes. I see that's, I didn't indicate that, and I see it's not going to work, but if I go back to the number of cards and the length of time it's going to take, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to implement the 3-minute rule per speaker. Next speaker is David Hauser, please.
Honorable Mayor Jim Cox and council members, these are not my notes for my speech. This is actually a document you might be interested in. It's called In School and On Track. And because of the coordination of police and school, it might be good to have on hand a document from the California Attorney General from the year 2013 on truancy. That's her focus here. And because you might not have seen it, I myself had not seen it until today, and I'm a teacher in Victorville in the alternative ed program. And by the way, I'm not here representing anyone but myself. This is not a school assigned task. But I made a copy of it, which I'd like to give the person in charge of receiving these things, and I put a little thumb drive in case you wanted to have a PDF of the document yourself. Anyway, there were two comments in here. It says that unlike some states, California's truancy laws, I understand you're dealing with a loitering ordinance, but it's in coordination. California's truancy laws are educational and not penal in nature. And our scheme is geared to returning students to school rather than toward punishment or criminalizing or criminal sanction for their parents. And there was another place in page 118. It was the idea that, I'll just sum it up, the law enforcement agency should seek criminal sanctions as the very last resort. And after they've followed all the procedures and guidelines in here, then you wouldn't be found running ahead of the Attorney General's directives or recommendations, however the legal term is for that. But at any rate, I wish to thank you for that. I wasn't sure if you had a copy. So when you talk about SARB and things like that, here's an actual document.
Thank you. Next speaker is Jerry Vincent.
Good evening, Mayor and fellow council members. My name is Jerry Vincent. I've been a resident of Apple Valley for 35 years, and I am recently retired from AT&T, serving as a data communications technician. I'd like to express my concerns regarding daytime loitering of minors as described in this ordinance number 2321. Upon reviewing this ordinance, I find myself being in agreement with its intent. However, there are several issues of concern. Firstly, it appears to me that there is a wrongness in its design. To my learning, it's a fundamental concern that whenever our government creates additional laws which subtly place Americans into a more socialistic lifestyle, it's then we are experiencing an erosion of our constitutional rights. I am specifically referring to the part of the ordinance where young people may be stopped during the daytime and asked for papers to justify being in public. I would ask you, do you believe it would be justifiable for an officer to accost a young person based solely on location and time of day? And even if a juvenile were having criminal thoughts, as opposed to having actually committed a crime, in this country, that young person has done no wrong. Secondly, I view this ordinance as an ineffective method of reducing juvenile crimes. It has already been documented that other cities have been insufficient or have seen insufficient differences to justify such an ordinance. I see the potential for abuse in racism and other forms of maltreatment. I base this on having two brothers that were city police officers, and I have learned of their attitudes towards the public as a whole and found them to be overly critical and unnecessarily harsh too often. This is not to reflect the conduct of the whole police force, but to be aware that a career of dealing with the worst side of humanity can create these attitudes. So my concern there is how this ordinance would be enforced upon our young people. Thirdly, according to my understanding, the existing Student Attendance Review Board is effective and can be more effective if it were to be better financed, therefore improving on an existing method of dealing with truancy. In regards to the process of detention, during and after detention, I ask, is it worthy of this city to create a greater burden of expense and time upon our law enforcing agencies? Lastly, I would like to suggest that instead of this ordinance, that this city would focus on avenues that would assist parents and students in gaining appreciation for the value of constant attendance in their schools. In that light, I also believe it is imperative that parents have an opportunity to better understand their personal efforts are greatly needed to participate with their teenagers in school activities. In conclusion, I do not ask that you reconsider the intent of this ordinance, but how to better accomplish the reduction of juvenile crimes. I want to thank each one of you for your time and attention.
Thank you. Next speaker, Amanda Schrader.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I feel like this ordinance number 2321 would be a direct violation of a minor's fundamental constitutional right to the freedom of movement as guaranteed by the 14th Amendment on public streets, highways, and areas of the city without being subjected to prior government restraint. And this is outlined in the 14th Amendment. And instead of needing probable cause based on evidence that the child may have committed a crime, daytime curfews or this particular ordinance allows for the police to intervene without it. Simply appearing young and being out in public are enough to warrant an investigation because of the concern that a crime might be committed. This is coercive preventative government establishing a law that restricts everyone in order to prevent the crimes by a few. Proponents of these types of law claims that the exemption as outlined in your ordinance will protect innocent children. But these proponents miss the point. Having an exemption does absolutely nothing to keep the police from stopping a child. An exemption only potentially helps a child after he has already been stopped and detained by the police. Year-round students, children of staggered or unusual schedules, tourists, and privately schooled children are among those who can still be detained and questioned by the police, who will then determine whether or not they fit into an exemption category. The burden of proof then lies on our children. Okay? In a free society, people should not be concerned that they may be stopped by police at any time and have to prove that they are not violating the law. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Elizabeth Byers.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name is Elizabeth Byers. I am an Apple Valley resident and also a local businesswoman of a grooming salon. I have some concerns with the anti-loitering law and oppose it. Some of the problems I have with it is the word loitering is too broad of a word and can be interpreted differently by the police. One definition might be to stand or wait around idly without apparent purpose, travel idly and with frequent pauses. Is it loitering to be browsing through a store? What if you go into the store and you're looking for something and they don't have the product you want and you walk out? Is that considered loitering? In many states and cities and towns, there are statutes and ordinance which can be applied specifically to control aggressive being, drug dealing, blocking entries to store, or public drunkenness, or being a public nuisance. So why do we need to have this anti-loitering law when other things are already in place? Juvenile anti-loitering laws cast too broad a net. The overwhelming majority of children who are out during school hours are innocent and not truant. It is the law. If this law is passed, any of the following could be stopped and questioned for just being out in public or appear to be loitering during the day. This includes students working in a work-study program, ROP, also students whose school day ends earlier or begins later than the loitering ordinance hours, minors who graduate from high school before 18, students whose schools have unusual days off, like i.e. development days, students who are out of school for winter, spring, or summer break, private homeschool students and on different schedules, and young adults over age 18 who look younger could all be stopped, and maybe they might appear to be loitering, but actually not. I myself probably appear to look 16. I'm actually 24. It is wrong to presume that young people who are out in public during any chosen day are truant. Traditional and some year-round school calendars in California typically hold classes 180 days per year according to the California Department of Education. This means that children with perfect attendance are legitimately out of school for approximately the remaining of 80 days weekly each year. To presume that every school in the country, whether public or private, should choose the same 80 vacation days or have the same hours is ludicrous. According to HSLDA, in Seal Beach, 7 young people were stopped the first 2 days of
But I have to
curfew law
wrap
was
this
in
up.
effect.
Your 3 minutes are up.
Thank you,
ahead,
Council.
Go ahead and wrap it up, please. Thank you. Ashley Schrader?
Thank you, Mayor and Council members, for your time letting me speak and voice my opinion. I believe that this daytime curfew law will violate my Fourth Amendment as a citizen of the United States. The Fourth Amendment states that the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation and particularly describing the place to be searched and the person or things to be seized. These types of laws violate the Fourth Amendment by allowing unreasonable searches of persons simply for being out in public. Identification papers, notes from parents or school officials, doctor's appointment reminders, etc., are personal papers not subject to search or seizure unless there is probable cause of a crime. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff Byers?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. I do, as the others have stated, appreciate your time and understand the constraints of limiting us to 3 minutes because there are a large group and you want to get out of here at a decent hour tonight. I'm a longtime resident of Apple Valley. I've lived up here since 1983. I'm a retired fire captain. I'm familiar with public service. I've worked with police side by side for many years. And I do support what they do. However, I think that this particular law that we're looking at here, that you're looking to adopt, has some major problems with it because of the fact that it includes our young people. Let me get my notes here. It doesn't just include, it groups all of our young people into into one group, and it makes it difficult for them to defend themselves. When we look at how this impacts the family as a whole, and I'm very interested in family. I think family is the roots of our society. That's what creates responsible societies, responsible citizens. And many times parents will take that opportunity and they'll educate their children either through private school, which is what I have done, or they may send their children to a public charter school, which includes independent study program students. And I feel like that what this does is this hinders the ability of those parents to provide that education for their children because of the fact that they're now subject to possibility of search or stopping to find out why they're there. And so if we have a child that has to go to a music lesson and they're able to drive on their own, they could be stopped, or maybe they stop at Starbucks and get a drink. And so it makes it difficult for parents to do what they need to do best, and that's raise responsible citizens, and that's what I fully support. And I feel like this law makes all of our children suspect before, just by the fact of their presence, of being in public. My daughter Elizabeth spoke about loitering. Victorville already has, in Title 13, already has loitering laws on the books that aren't exclusive to a specific age or race or religion. And that's what we're doing with this loitering law, is we're saying a specific age. And so in summing this up, I want you to understand that it kind of goes back to the idea, the concept of the internment camps that they had during World War II. My mom knew of a woman, a girl at the time, because she was about 13, 14, a friend that was interned because she was Japanese American. Right? And while I don't see this law doing that, it lends that way. What's next? Do the parents have to get cards to show the police? And so I really question the validity of this law and the effectiveness. And I do want to thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Byers. Roxanne Barrett. Please try to stay within the 3 minutes.
No problem. Okay. Good evening, and thank you for letting me speak.
Pull the microphone down, please. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thanks for letting me speak. My name is Roxanne Barrett, a resident of Hesperia who's concerned about this ordinance. Daytime curfews dangerously train our young citizens to accept, as the norm, the restrictions that are inconsistent with their freedom. They should be educated to enjoy and use their freedom responsibly up into their adult years. Daytime curfews send a strong message to young citizens who are self-disciplined and responsible that the community makes no distinction between them and the irresponsible young citizens who abuse their freedom in ways that are damaging and destructive to our community. Responsible citizens are being punished for irresponsible citizens that break rules and laws. Please reconsider the ordinance.
Thank you. Alan Craver? Is that correct? C-R-A-V-E-R? Craver? Okay.
Yes, it is Craver. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members, for allowing us to speak. I am a Victorville resident, and I'd like to thank the council for addressing the issue of crime in Victorville. I'm also a public school teacher, and because of that, I am familiar with the SARB process and its effectiveness. Essentially, the anti-loitering ordinance becomes a daytime curfew, as has been said, and those are in essence beefed up truancy ordinances. All states have already addressed the area of truancy in a comprehensive way. There is no need for new laws addressing the issue of truancy. The present laws addressing minors simply need to be enforced. The California Education Code 48264 says, the attendance supervisor or his or her designee, a peace officer, a school administrator or his or her designee, or a probation officer may arrest or assume temporary custody during school hours of any minor subject to compulsory full-time education or to compulsory continuing education found away from his or her home and who is absent from school without valid excuse within the county, city, or city and county, or school district. Under current law, including Education Codes 48264 and 48265, an innocent minor would not be cited and required to appear at a court hearing as they could under a daytime curfew or loitering law, but would be taken either to their parents or their school of enrollment. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Sarah Byers?
evening, council members and mayor. I am opposed to this ordinance for many of the reasons that have been stated already. There's one area that I would like to specifically draw your attention to, and I think we're all here tonight because we are concerned with juvenile safety and well-being, and there's an aspect of this that actually inhibits minor safety and their well-being, and this ordinance would significantly increase the risk of all minors of falling prey to predators. And this is the reason because all minors who are out in public during this anti-loitering law legally, because of the exemptions listed in the ordinance, they will feel obligated to give information and proof that they should be allowed to be out in public because they are deemed as suspect in violation of the law. Also, when they are approached to be detained, they will feel obligated to be approachable and to give their time. And this can be dangerous for an instance of plainclothes officers. There was an instance in Monrovia where 2 teenage girls were followed by 2 plainclothes officers in an unmarked vehicle, and they noticed this and they tried to avoid them. And the officers got out and did detain them. The girls were fearful of their safety, even though they were detained this time by officers trying to enforce the law. Next time, what if it isn't? You know, what if it is a predator? They feel obligated that they need to be approachable, and this puts them potentially in danger. All a would-be predator will have to do is look for any child in public during the anti-loitering time and pose as an officer and tell a child he's being taken for violation. This is dangerous for all of our minors who are out legitimately for different reasons, that maybe schools are on different tracks. And this is really not a good thing to implement, that they're supposed to be approachable by strangers that they don't know. And especially in the case of plainclothes officers, you know, they don't know. I was out in public and there was a plainclothes officer. I didn't know it at the time, and I think later I saw his badge when he was paying for his food or something. I had no idea. And so there really is no way to tell. So it's dangerous for minors, and I hope that you will review all these reasons and not pass this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Pamela Steverson.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. I am here as a concerned citizen and parent to oppose the juvenile daytime loitering law. Under this law, law enforcement officials are obligated to question unattended minors loitering during specified hours. This type of ordinance will simply divert attention from real crime prevention programs and interfere with effective police work, and may even draw unwanted attention from Children Protective Services. Since it is impossible to question all violators, only select minors may be questioned. This opens up the extremely dangerous potential for unequal treatment of minors based upon dress, appearance, language, and race. Selective enforcement is the ability that executors of the law, such as police officers, have to arbitrarily select choice individuals as being outside of the law. Historically, selective enforcement is seen as an abuse of power because it violates the rule of law, allowing men to apply justice or injustice only when they choose. Some of us have chosen an alternative form of education outside of the public school buildings. Even though there are exclusions, it will not exempt them from being questioned. How else will law enforcement know who we are? Thank you.
Thank you. That is the last card that I had for individuals that wanted to speak. Staff has worked with the Sheriff's Department when this began, and we haven't heard from the Sheriff's Department. Doug Robertson, City Manager, are you going to make a presentation on this, or someone from the Sheriff's Department?
I'm not going to make a presentation. I do have a couple of comments based on some of the concerns that were raised that I would like to bring to the council's attention, and then also invite our police lieutenant to come up, who is actually going to introduce the council to one of our school resource officers, one of his deputies, who has worked on this ordinance. But one of the comments was that one of the Victorville School District has a successful SARB program. Just to remind the council that there's actually 5 separate school districts that serve students within the city of Victorville, and there are different funding levels for each one. So Having one that is successful doesn't mean that the other 4 are or are not. I don't know that in detail. Perhaps the school resource officer may know. And then additionally, we also have several charter schools as well, who students may or may not be truant. Not to steal any thunder from the police department, but the education code currently allows any police officer to stop and detain a student during the daytime. So there's really a different purpose to this ordinance. One of the early speakers also talked about for the city to not impose this on their police department, to require them to do this. And just to remind the council and the public that this item is not being imposed on the police department or the sheriff's department by the city. It's actually before the council at the request of the police department, our sheriff's department, in order to assist them in their day-to-day operations. So just wanted to remind the council and the public of that for those of you that may not have known it. And with that, I'll introduce Lieutenant John Billings once again to make a few comments perhaps and introduce his school resource officer.
Good evening, Lieutenant Billings.
Mayor, members of the council. I'm going to have one of my resident experts, one of our school resource officers, Deputy John Rosardi, come up. But before I do, I just want to make a couple comments. This ordinance is not about decreasing juvenile crime. One of the ladies that stood up said exactly what I was going to say. It is about safety and well-being of the juveniles within the city. Secondly, as the city manager just noted, the current California Education Code currently gives us the authority, if we have reasonable suspicion, to stop and detain a juvenile right now. We do that all the time, daily. What it doesn't have is any teeth to it. So we already have the authority to stop and talk to these juveniles that we suspect during school hours are loitering at the mall, for instance. So we can do that already. We're not changing that. We're not adding anything. This just gives it a little bit of teeth. We also, as a police department, agree with something one of the speakers said, and that is we agree that the majority of the juveniles in this city are good kids. This isn't geared toward them. So with that being said, those few comments, I'm going to bring up Deputy John Rosardi, and he has all the information and be able to answer any questions that the council might have.
Lieutenant, I do have a question. This seems to me to be an important issue. I have read this ordinance, and it seems to say to me, this is what is law today. It is unlawful for loitering, et cetera, et cetera. You have the authority to detain whenever you have reasonable suspicion. Do you see this ordinance as something giving you an incentive to go out and stop students going through Starbucks or just in the normal course of things? Is that what you're up to here?
No. The Chief Lucia is looking at it as an investment in the police department's future, meaning we want to get the word out about this ordinance and that there will be a penalty attached so that in the future our proactive patrols can be directed where they need to be and not in areas where we're having issues such as this.
So do I understand correctly? This doesn't change the law. It doesn't add any new law. It simply gives us the opportunity to impose a fine on a first, second, third violation.
Correct. And Deputy Rosardi will speak to that. But we already have the authority to detain and transport the juveniles one of two places, to a parent or to school. We currently have that authority right now. All this does is attach a fine.
So basically, what we're trying to do is hold the parent accountable for those parents who are irresponsible and not maintaining control over their children. Is that correct?
It's a mechanism to do such, yes.
Could you give your name and title, please, so we'll know exactly who you are for the record?
My name is Jonathan Rosardi. I'm a deputy sheriff out of the Victorville City Station.
Okay, go ahead.
Bring the microphone.
I'm sorry. Like Lieutenant Billings already said, we already have the legal authority to stop and detain these juveniles. It's not something we're going to try to put together sweeps and target juveniles and make them feel uncomfortable. We do have a large majority of these juveniles that are great kids, that are homeschooled, they're in extracurricular activities, and we're not looking to go punish all these kids. We're looking for the kids that are habitually truant that we're finding tagging at the mall. There are a lot of times we come in contact with these kids at the mall that are just causing hate and discontent, and right now there's nothing we can legally do that gives any binding to these parents. All we can do is take them home or take them back to school, where they turn around and leave again and do the exact same thing, because they know that there's no punishment for them being out of school. The SAR board is in effect, and the school district is working on that, but in the year, a little over a year that I've been an SRO with the high school district, I have yet to sit through one SAR meeting, and I was informed it was due to budget constraints. It is great that they are going to get this up and rolling again, but what happens in the near future when budget cuts come and they can't afford to run SAR? Now we're back in the same predicament of not being able to have any teeth to hold these kids accountable for not being in school.
Thank you. Is questions from council members?
I would just like to say that I did a ride-along recently with the police department, and I saw some very disturbing things like you mentioned at the mall. And I'll give you a for instance. There was a young, I think he was about 14 or 15, and he was a chronic shoplifter from Macy's. And they had him, and they were trying to locate his parents, and they could not find his parents. And he had been, it was like 2 hours that they were holding him, and they needed his parents because he was stealing over $400 worth of merchandise from Macy's. And he basically said that his mother left, and his father was in Vegas in jail somewhere. And it was very sad that we had no mechanism in place to hold parents accountable, and the police department was held up with this child and spending an enormous amount of time on this child rather than going out there and handling domestic violence calls or calls that were really, really needed. And I saw this, and it was consistent, and I did an 8-hour ride, and it was consistent through the 8-hour ride where we had, and it doesn't appear to be these types of parents that care enough to come here tonight and voice their opinion. It was parents that absolutely don't care, have drug problems, that are in prison, that just don't care about their kids. And we need a way to get them to care and to impose fines so that our police department is not being used in this capacity as babysitters. And I think this ordinance is very much needed. We don't have enough money in our budget to pay our police to be babysitters, and we need to do something. We need to give them the teeth that they need to get something done.
Thank you.
I have a comment. Two different speakers, I guess a third one, alluded to undercover or plainclothes officers following students in Monrovia. I've worked with you guys for a lot of years. I've never seen undercover officers do that. Is that something unique to Monrovia, or can you envision that?
I can't speak to Monrovia unless we had a major crime or something we were investigating. We don't have deputies to follow juveniles.
I thought it was strange. Okay. Other questions? Other comments? Council members, comments or questions? Start on the left. I think because we have pulled this off of the consent items, if you have questions or comments, now's the time to do that. Councilmember Garcia. Mayor Pro Tem McEachran.
I pulled this off of consent, obviously, for the very reason you all showed up tonight. I met with Tamara last week, had a lengthy conversation with her. You just backed up what I told her, that the SAR effectiveness, at least in the Victor Union High School District, is not working. And that's a sad thing. I wonder how many of the people that are here tonight have actually been to a school district board meeting to complain about what they are doing at their school district, or what any of the other school districts in the High Desert are doing. I noticed that many people are here from Apple Valley and Hesperia, and to those of you that are here, I appreciate you being here. But quite frankly, what we deal with here in Victorville is Victorville. And so sometimes what goes on in Apple Valley or what goes on in Hesperia doesn't necessarily affect Victorville. Sometimes it does. But at the end of the day, it's frustrating to hear that I have, Tamara, your husband said that SAR is effective. I have my deputy telling me it's not. So who's right? Who's telling the truth? I had another gal, and forgive me, I don't remember her name, talk about how this would somehow allow predators to target specific students that were actually violating an anti-loitering ordinance. Really? If your student is out right now, couldn't a predator attack them? I don't understand. The logic behind that argument seems to speak both ways. For every argument that you could make the argument that if we don't do something and something happens to one of your children, 3 times the amount of people will be in these chambers complaining to this council that we didn't do anything. And so, you know, having 2 children, it boggles the mind. At best, from my perspective, you know, I think that I would be willing to allow for some more time to have more discussion on this issue, but I just don't understand the arguments. I really wonder if any of you have thought about the fact that if your child was out during the daytime unsupervised and was approached by a predator, sexual predator, registered sexual predator, and was victimized by them, how many of you would be back here blaming us the next meeting? I just don't understand where the logic is behind that. And that's all I got to say.
Thank you, Mr. McEachran. Councilmember Vias?
I totally agree with Councilmember McEachran's comments. I know as a parent and a grandparent now that I would want to know where my kids are at, and I certainly wouldn't allow my kids on the streets, especially right now with the AB 109 that are released out there. We have tens of thousands of inmates that are being released into the population, not because they served their time, not because they've been rehabilitated, is because we have overcrowding. And these people are the people that you see out there homeless in the river, walking the streets, and this is not a time or a place to want or to fight for your kids to be allowed to walk on these streets because it is unsafe. And we don't have enough police to handle that, let alone to deal with kids that are not being monitored by their parents. And I am not willing to spend any more time listening to these arguments. I'm willing to move and vote on this tonight.
Councilmember Kennedy.
I do not see a constitutional issue here. The courts hold the police's feet to the fire on stopping and arresting. There must be probable cause. I trust the court system to do that job properly. I believe it's necessary that we give our police officers the teeth they need to enforce our ordinances. What good is an ordinance if it has no enforcement teeth? So there's no new law here. We're just putting teeth in the law that exists now, so I don't need to. I've heard all the arguments I need to hear.
Thank you. My comments are as follows. I read the articles that were submitted by one of the speakers. I also have tried to read other articles that I could get a hold of. One of the primary issues about being a violation of civil rights unconstitutional, I tried to do some research to see if San Bernardino County teachers, California state teachers, or any other group had challenged the state law. Since that becomes an issue because it's all on the books now and it's not being challenged. And in 2 or 3 instances, it's been upheld where there's been individual challenges by the appellate courts. The Supreme Court would not hear it, which upheld the appellate court decisions. And if parents or teachers or schools are concerned about the law, I'm not sure why it isn't being challenged at the state level. All we're doing is adding teeth for our local law enforcement officer for a law that's on the books now by the state of California that's been upheld. I just don't understand the arguments. It's being challenged at the state. If there was a court hearing coming up, I think we should wait, but it's not. This has been on the state books for 10 years. At least some of the information that I read indicated it's 10-year-old law cases. So it just kind of defies logic that a group of anyone would say it's okay to have the law on the books, we're confident, it's okay, but we don't want you to put teeth in it for our local law enforcement officers. When you consider that the state is now turning loose thousands of people because there's not room, And when you consider the increased number of homeless and the crime that's in the homeless community, this is not the same society as we had 10 years ago. And I agree with our police chief when I've had long discussions with him on this, that there are instances where they need, for the benefit, for the health, safety, welfare of the students, for the parents, and for the city to have the teeth in this ordinance. And I think his arguments have been overwhelming. I do want to make the comment that we had 4 from Apple Valley, 5 from Hesperia, 3 from Victorville. You're all welcome. We always want the comments. But I have to add that personally there's been an overwhelming number of people from Victorville that urge we adopt this. So, council members, we have opened this up for, it's not a public hearing, it wasn't advertised as a public hearing, this is for the second reading, but we have allowed everyone to have their input. If there are no more questions to administration or the deputy sheriff, chair is open for motion.
We'll need to do a voice vote on this one. First motion?
Sorry?
This will have to be a voice vote. We did the
All
consent
right.
calendar.
This will be for a voice vote, but we don't have a motion yet.
I move.
Second.
And this is to go ahead and have the second reading of ordinance number 2321 for adoption. This is for the adoption.
Aye.
Aye.
Motion and second. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? None opposed. It's unanimous. It is.
Motion carries unanimously. To adopt ordinance number 2321.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is written communications. For those following, it is D1. This is a presentation of a request to approve the piggyback purchase of 2 2015 Kenworth T370 conventional cabs with a 15-ounce ox dump body CTS 16372 and B, one 15-foot ox dump body CTS 16367. Total amount of $232,493.38. Any questions of staff? If not, chair's open for a motion.
Motion by Councilmember Kennedy, second by Councilmember Valles. You may start voting. Motion carries unanimously.
Item 2. This is the information item only, notice of amendment of conflicts of interest code. Any questions of staff? Doesn't require an action of the council. Item 3, copy of the 35th Amendment to Law Enforcement Contract number 94-909. Any questions of our city manager? If not, for a motion.
Motion by Councilmember Valles, second by Councilmember Kennedy. You may start voting.
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to abstain on this one just out of the abundance of caution. This is Victorville School District, and my wife works for them. I've generally abstained on those.
That'd be appropriate then, and you should leave the dais.
Is this for the school district? Oh, I see. Okay, yeah, I understand.
This item adds 3 deputies to our ranks. One is a school resource officer for the Victor Elementary School District.
That is good news. I hope all the parents and students here heard that. I think that's pleasing to everyone. We need it. Motion?
Motion carries with Mayor McEachran absent.
Item number 4, resolution of the City Council of the City of Victorville adopting targets for Victorville Municipal Utility Services to procure cost-effective energy storage systems. Any questions of Mr. Robertson? Not. Motion. Second.
Motion by Councilmember Valles, second by Councilmember Garcia. Let me start voting. Motion carries unanimously.
Item 5, amendment to consultant professional services standard provider agreement with Albert Grover and Associates for traffic engineering services. No questions? Ready for motion?
Motion by Councilmember Valles, second by Councilmember Kennedy. Let me start voting. Motion carries unanimously.
Mayor, on D6, I'm going to abstain as well, as SC Engineering is a firm of a client of my firm.
Question before you leave. On a conflict of interest, you should leave, but on an abstention, it isn't necessary for the person to leave the dais, is it?
If it's a conflict of interest, you should certainly leave the room.
Is that what it is? Conflict? Okay, never mind. There are other reasons to abstain. I just didn't know. Item number 6, staff recommends City Council award a professional services agreement in the amount of $48,801 to SC Engineering for the design of US 395 and La Mesa Road intersection.
Go back. I missed my motion. Let's see.
We have
Can
a
we
motion
do a
and
voice
second.
vote on that? I'm sorry. Let's see. Can you repeat who the motions were, please? It was a motion by,
Angela Valles,
and the second was by
Gloria.
Garcia. Okay. You may
Favor
start
of this
voting.
item.
Motion carries with Mayor Pro Tem McEachran absent.
Next item, agenda item number 7, Resolution 14-067 entitled, A Resolution of the City Council of the City of Victorville, California, approving and authorizing the city manager to execute a cell tower lease agreement between the city and New Singular Wireless for a site in Brentwood Park, and further authorizing the city manager to routinely execute most cell tower lease agreements on behalf of the city under the conditions specified herein. Are there any questions? If there are no questions, we'll vote, please.
Motion by Councilmember Kennedy, second by Councilmember Garcia. Can you start voting? Motion carries unanimously.
Item 8, Measure I 5-year plan, adopt resolution 14-068, adopting the Measure I 5-year capital improvement plan for fiscal years 2014-15 through 2018-19. Questions?
Mr. Mayor, just a question. And Doug, maybe you can explain. I was looking at the plan for the Nisqually. Does this tell us the payback or when the Nisqually interchange will be, our Measure I funds will be used completely to pay for that?
It really doesn't. Just briefly, the loan of the Measure I maintenance dollars, we're anticipating it'll be repaid to Sandbag in sometime in spring of next year, of 2016. I'm sorry, February to April timeframe. At that point in time, we will begin receiving those maintenance monies once again, to the tune of $3.5 to $4 or so million, and we will finally be able to do some major road repairs with that money. We're anticipating that probably for another 10 to 11 years, any development impact fees for roads will annually be sent to Sandbag and then come back to us as maintenance money to repay that approximately $11 million loan from our future Measure I. So the bad news is we don't have a whole lot of maintenance dollars, just what we've saved up over the years, and we did, for another year and a half. But the good news is after that point, we're looking at probably $4.5 to $5 million in maintenance money for probably the next 10 years or so that we can catch up.
Thank you.
With the conditions of our streets and deteriorating every day,
Yeah.
we desperately need to get to the point where we can start spending money on local streets. Do we have a motion that said we do?
Motion by Councilmember Valles, second by Mayor Pro Tem McEachran. Let me start voting. Motion carries unanimously.
Item 9, Mojave Integrated Regional Water Management Plan update. The plan is available. Resolution number 14-011, adopting the plan. Any questions? If none, motion be in order.
Motion by Councilmember Kennedy, second by Councilmember Valles. May start voting. Motion carries unanimously.
Item 10, submitted by our city manager, request to approve annual expenditures for meter reading and data management services provided by Trimark Associates Incorporated.
Motion by Councilmember Kennedy, second by Councilmember Valles. May start voting. Motion carries unanimously.
Mr. Mayor, on D11, if I could ask our city attorney, I wasn't a part of this original vote on this agreement. I had to abstain due to property within the region less than 300 feet. Do I need to abstain on this particular issue with regard to payment?
No, this is just implementation of an already existing agreement. You have no discretion on this. We're just approving basically payments consistent with an agreement that was approved by the board without your participation.
Okay.
Are there any questions? Any other questions, staff? If not, motion be in order.
Motion by Councilmember Kennedy, second by Mayor Pro Tem McEachron. You may start voting. Motion carries unanimously.
At this point in time, that concludes the body of the main agenda. We are at public comments of items of interest from the public. I have no cards from anyone wishing to speak to the city council. I see no one approaching the podium. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to take this time to thank you and the council for your time this evening, for letting all of us be heard, and for the conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Report from the city manager.
Staff has no additional comments at this time.
No comments. Reports from council members. Start on the right. Since the last time I polled the council, we started on the left. Mr. Kennedy.
Two things. First thing I'd like to request, and this is just to give relief to the, not just the city clerk, but the acting city clerk, could we just be referred to as Mr. and Mrs. instead of council member this and mayor pro tem that and so on? I mean, it's just be so much easier than stumbling over our titles.
And see, yeah, and you don't even, you could just call me McEachron.
You just say
or
Mr. or
just
Mrs.
him,
That's good
or that
enough.
guy. That guy. I'm fine.
The other thing was, I saw in the paper, I don't know, last week sometime maybe, and the mayor and I discussed this briefly. One of the prisons is offering the assistance of, I guess, some of their low security prisoners to help some of the nonprofits in the area. And I don't know how that's going to work out with the nonprofits, but I'm wondering if they would like to extend that assistance to the city of Victorville on some of our cleanup projects, street cleanup, graffiti, and whatnot.
They have, and we have taken them up on that. In fact, one of the items that we're going to be purchasing in the very near future is another animal control truck, and we're working with the prison. It's the Federal Bureau of Prisons to actually have them either manufacture or rehabilitate the box on the back that is tremendously expensive that houses all the animals. So we are working with them on that, and we're talking with them about using some of their minimum security labor. They have, if I recall, the warden said that they have, I think it was 325 or 375 female inmates who would be available for something like that. He can't have any of his other inmates leave the yard, but that certainly is available to nonprofits. We do take advantage of that with the Sheriff's Department, with some of their inmates, and we are looking into it with the Federal Bureau of Prisons as well.
It goes without saying that we should be very careful on security investigations on the people we pick. But if they're available and if they're good and this gives them a rehab opportunity, let's do it.
That's a great idea, Councilmember Weiss. I'm sorry to get in front of you, but I think it's a great idea, number one. Number two, where I read where either Hesperia or Apple Valley is getting ready for their annual cleanup day. I know Victorville is going to have that. And all the volunteers, and there are a lot, they do a wonderful job, but it barely makes a dent. And then we go a year before we clean up again, and it seems like to me that we have certain key areas that we can identify, that if we could put together a volunteer crew or the prison crew, we ought to do it for the benefit of the city. I think as long as you have a roadway strewn with trash, it's almost an invitation to people passing in automobiles to throw the trash out the window. If it's nice and clean, I think it should work as a deterrent. We need to do everything we can to mean what we say and see if we can get those areas cleaned up. So, Councilman Kennedy, thank you for bringing that. I hope the city manager will pursue that. I hope we'll be successful and we'll put a dent into this. Councilmember Baez, please. Mayor Pro Tem McEachran.
Well, just to echo what Councilmember Kennedy said, we've had our editor of the local daily press talk about the Pride program and cleaning up our cities. He's been very complimentary of this council and what we've attempted to do. I challenged the local Rotary Club to take it a step further and step up and pick their own project, but perhaps your idea could play into this as our role from our city perspective, in addition to what our code enforcement already does. I mean, they're already taxed beyond belief to help keep the city clean, but perhaps this can play into that whole program. So I'm interested in hearing what else we could do with that.
Ryan, I just want to add to that. I've had a chance to talk to Steve Hunt, and we all should commend him on the articles he's written about Victorville Pride.
Yeah.
It's just, I think it's really had an effect.
Well, I think it's brought it, I mean, it's always on our mind, but I think keeping it on our mind sometimes in light of everything else we have to deal with sometimes can be an issue, and he's kept it there, and I think that that's important. The only other thing, and I have to give our city manager a hard time once again for the second time today, our total agenda, total number of pages, for those of you that have it printed out, I do not, I get it online. 2,541 pages has got to be the record for the longest agenda this city council has ever seen, although we didn't even hear all the issues tonight. So can you imagine what it'll be when it comes back to us?
Yeah, that appeal hearing will be back, and it's a whole lot of pages.
And by the way, I shouldn't just jab you, I should jab our city attorney on that one as well.
That doesn't make me feel a whole lot better, nor does that make him help me out with my fine at Rotary that you fined me today.
I'll share Doug's pain.
There you go.
Councilmember Garcia.
But not the money.
Recently, I had gotten some requests. I tried to pass those on. I took a tour within a mile and a half of my house. 26 streetlights that do not work. And the question is, do we pay for those, even though they're not working, to Southern California Edison, which can't keep my air conditioners on? Also, whose responsibility is it to check the streetlights? The ones on the bridge at Roy Rogers Interchange, those 4 or 5 lights have been out now for a month or more. So who checks? Who does it? Who follows up? What if we send Edison a bill and say, less the 100 and some streetlights that don't work? I think we need to keep our streets lit. We want to have a safe public. There are people who walk, and it's unbelievable how many streetlights don't work for some reason.
Yeah, we used to have one or two at times staffers that would check those streetlights, and as the street lighting funds dwindled over time, those monies had to be spent simply to pay the electric bill for them. With the new street lighting assessment district that was approved a little over a year ago, eventually, it's not happening quite yet, but eventually that will bring in the funds that we can bring a staffer back on or task a staffer to start doing those exact things. So thank you very much.
It's just, I don't think I live in an area that would be unique as far as the streetlights, and if there's that many outs within a mile of my house, I can imagine what it is. I think it's worth having
For any of the
someone
public
look at.
watching, if you have a street light that's out in your area, if you notice one, if you notify the city, we can make those contacts with Edison. It doesn't have to be a city staffer that is reporting it. We can certainly pass those things on.
I have 26 of them that are out. So.
Give me a list, boss.
That's all that I have, and thank you very much for the people who attended the meeting tonight, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for attending.